The Great Hall of Harmony Prime buzzed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy gathered for what many considered the most important trial in galactic history. Floating platforms held delegates whose forms defied easy description. Crystalline entities that sang in harmonious tones, gaseous beings contained within environmental suits, and creatures that existed partially in dimensions beyond normal perception. In the center of this cosmic assembly sat 47 representatives, each speaking for billions of their kind. Ambassador David Torres adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and tried not to show the weight pressing down on his shoulders. Behind him sat the 12-person human delegation, their faces carefully neutral despite knowing they were fighting for their species' future. The air recycling systems hummed constantly, working overtime to accommodate the breathing requirements of dozens of different life forms. High Arbiter Voss rose from the central podium, their ethereal form shimmering like aurora lights. When they spoke, translation devices throughout the hall converted their harmonic speech into hundreds of different languages simultaneously. The charges they read sent ripples of unease through the human section. The species known as humanity stands accused of excessive militaristic behavior, failure to integrate peacefully with galactic civilization, and posing a continued threat to the stability of the Federation. Voss's voice carried no emotion, but their words fell like hammer blows. Evidence will now be presented to support these charges. The prosecution began with military footage that made humanity look like a species of warmongers. Videos showed human Marines training with weapons that could level city blocks. Ship recordings displayed human vessels equipped with enough firepower to crack planets. Battle simulations revealed tactical doctrines focused on overwhelming force and rapid deployment. Each piece of evidence built the case that humans were fundamentally incompatible with galactic peace. Representative Thresh of the hegemony species took the floor, their insectoid form clicking as they moved. In my sector, human expansion has proceeded at an alarming rate. They established colonies with defensive positions that could withstand siege warfare. Their merchant vessels carry military-grade shields and weapons. Even their civilian populations receive combat training. This is not the behavior of a peaceful species. More testimonies followed from species across the galaxy. The collective described feeling uncomfortable during diplomatic meetings with humans claiming that human thoughts were too aggressive for their shared consciousness to process safely. The peaceful gardener species presented recordings of human terraforming projects that they claimed showed violent reshaping of natural planetary systems. Ambassador Torres watched the proceedings with growing dismay. Every human achievement was being twisted into evidence of their dangerous nature. Their rapid expansion wasn't described as exploration and growth, but as aggressive territorial acquisition. Their defensive preparations weren't seen as prudent precautions, but as signs of warmongering intent. Their technological achievements weren't celebrated as contributions to galactic knowledge, but feared as tools of potential destruction. When Torres finally stood to present humanity's defense, the hall fell silent. He spoke clearly, his words translated and broadcast to billions of beings throughout Federation space. Honorable delegates, you speak of humanity's military capabilities as if they exist in a vacuum. You ignore that those same capabilities have protected Federation trade routes from pirate attacks. You dismiss that human medical research has saved millions of lives across dozens of species. You overlook that our aggressive terraforming has created agricultural worlds that now feed 3 entire sectors. He gestured to the viewing screens, which displayed human achievements the prosecution had ignored. Space stations where human engineers worked alongside alien colleagues. Research facilities where human scientists shared their discoveries freely. Hospitals where human doctors treated patients from species they had never encountered before. You fear our weapons but ignore that we have never used them against Federation members. You worry about our expansion, but forget that we have shared every world we have settled. You call us dangerous, but in 2 centuries of contact, name one Federation species that humanity has attacked without provocation. The hall remained silent because no such example existed. Humanity had fought pirates, defended colonies from raiders, and engaged in border skirmishes with non-Federation powers, but never once had they initiated hostilities against fellow Federation members. Torres continued, his voice carrying the weight of desperation. We are different from you, this is true. We evolved on a world that demanded strength to survive. We developed technologies of war because we needed them to protect what we had built. But we also developed art, music, literature, and philosophy. We created systems of justice, principles of mercy, and traditions of hospitality. Judge us not just by our weapons, but by how we choose to use them. The defense presentation lasted 3 hours. Torres showed recordings of human peacekeepers helping to resolve conflicts between other species. He presented data on human contributions to Federation science, art, and culture. He displayed testimonials from alien citizens who had been saved by human actions or benefited from human innovation. But the die was already cast. When the vote was called, representative after representative stood to cast their judgment. The crystalline builders voted to support humanity, their harmonic voices singing a song of acceptance. The aquatic deep swimmers also voted in humanity's favor, their representative speaking of the courage they admired in human exploration. 45 other species voted for exile. High Arbiter Voss announced the sentence with the same emotionless tone they had used throughout the trial. By overwhelming majority, the Galactic Federation hereby orders the immediate withdrawal of all human presence from Federation space. Humanity will retain sovereignty over their homeworld and 3 adjacent star systems. All other human colonies, installations, and vessels must be evacuated within 30 standard rotations. A quantum barrier will be established to enforce this boundary. Any human vessel found beyond this perimeter will be destroyed without warning. The gavel fell with a sound that echoed throughout the great hall. As the alien delegates began filing out, many chattering excitedly about the day's events, Torres stood slowly. His delegation remained seated, their faces showing the shock of a people who had just learned they were no longer welcome in the galaxy they had helped to explore. But Torres's final words carried clearly through the hall's acoustics, reaching ears and sensory organs of every species present. His voice was calm, measured, and carried an undertone that made several delegates pause in their conversations. You mistake restraint for weakness, he said, meeting the glowing eyes of High Arbiter Voss directly. Throughout our history, that has always been your error. The human delegation filed out in perfect order, their dignity intact despite the humiliation they had just endured. Behind them, the representatives of 47 species continued their celebrations, confident that they had just made the galaxy a safer place. None of them noticed the small smile that crossed Torres's face as he walked toward the transport bay, or the way his hand briefly touched the communication device that would carry news of this day's proceedings back to human space. The galaxy had just made a decision that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. They would have exactly 30 days to prepare for the consequences. Trade ships drifted through the outer rim sectors with an ease that would have been impossible 5 years earlier. Their captains no longer worried about sudden attacks or the need for armed escorts. The galaxy had settled into a comfortable rhythm of commerce and diplomacy that many species had forgotten was possible. Peace, it seemed, had finally come to Federation space. On the bridge of the merchant vessel Golden Current, Captain Yeth of the Trader Guild reviewed shipping manifests with satisfaction. His route now included 12 worlds that had once been human colonies, their valuable resources and strategic locations now distributed among various Federation members. The agricultural world of Haven had been claimed by the collective, its vast grain fields feeding their expanding population. The mining stations around Kepler had been taken over by the industrial hegemony, their extraction rates now triple what the humans had achieved. It's amazing how much more efficient things became once we removed the complicating factor, Yeth mentioned to his first officer, a young member of the peaceful gardener species. No more territorial disputes, no more arms races, no more species trying to outdo each other with military displays. His officer nodded enthusiastically, their leafy appendages rustling with agreement. The Council reports that military spending across all Federation worlds has dropped by 60% since the exile. Those resources are now being used for research, education, and cultural development. Some theorists believe we may have achieved the first truly peaceful galactic civilization in known history. The quantum barrier that separated human space from the rest of the galaxy had become something of a curiosity. Scientists who studied it reported complete silence from the other side. No radio transmissions, no energy signatures, no signs of space travel or industrial activity. Some Federation researchers theorized that humanity had destroyed itself in civil war, unable to cope with the shame of their exile. Others suggested they had retreated into virtual reality systems, abandoning physical existence entirely. Dr. Nash, the Federation's leading expert on quantum mechanics, published regular reports on the barrier's effectiveness. Her latest study concluded that not only was the barrier completely impermeable, but that whatever existed on the other side had gone completely quiet. "It's as if an entire species simply stopped existing," she wrote in her widely read paper. Perhaps this is the natural result when an aggressive civilization is forced to confront its own limitations. The border worlds that had once requested heavy defenses against potential human expansion now used their military budgets for other projects. The fortress world of Gateway had converted its weapons platforms into research stations. The strategic outpost at Crossroads had been transformed into a cultural exchange center, where young beings from across the galaxy came to study art and philosophy. Admiral Kess of the Federation fleet found himself with the unusual problem of having too few conflicts to manage. His once mighty armada now spent most of its time conducting scientific surveys and providing escort services for diplomatic missions. Many of his best officers had transferred to civilian positions, finding more challenge in terraforming projects and deep space exploration than in military service. The humans always claimed they were defenders of peace, Admiral Kess mentioned during a staff meeting at Federation headquarters. But look how peaceful the galaxy became once we removed them from the equation. Perhaps they were the source of the tensions they claimed to be protecting us from. His intelligence officer, Commander Vale of the sensor-focused Watcher species, presented the latest reports from the quantum barrier monitoring stations. "Complete radio silence continues from human space, Admiral. Our long-range sensors detect no starship movement, no energy signatures consistent with industrial activity, and no communications of any kind. The few automated systems they left behind went dark 3 years ago. The galaxy had moved on in other ways too. Human history was being quietly edited in Federation databases. Their contributions to medical science were now credited to joint research projects. Their role in establishing safe trade routes was attributed to early Federation peacekeeping efforts. The wars they had fought against pirates and raiders were described as police actions by Federation forces. Even the few species that had voted against human exile rarely mentioned them anymore. The crystalline builders had returned to their massive construction projects, creating space habitats that housed millions of beings. The deep swimmers focused on their underwater cities, developing new forms of aquatic technology. Both species seemed to accept that the exile had been inevitable, even if they had opposed it. On the 5th anniversary of the exile, High Arbiter Voss held a celebration ceremony at Harmony Prime. Representatives from all 47 species attended, praising the wisdom of their decision and the peace that had followed. They spoke of a new golden age, of cooperation between species reaching levels never before achieved. "We have proven that diversity and peace are not contradictory," Voss announced to the gathered delegates. "By making the difficult decision to remove a disruptive element, we have allowed the true nature of galactic civilization to flourish. Let this anniversary mark not just the removal of a threat, but the birth of a new era of understanding." The celebration lasted 3 days and included cultural exhibitions, scientific presentations, and diplomatic ceremonies. Artists created works commemorating the Great Peace. Scientists presented research that had been impossible during the years of tension with humanity. Diplomats signed new treaties and trade agreements that further solidified Federation unity. But in the depths of space, beyond the quantum barrier that had cut off human space from the rest of the galaxy, something stirred in the darkness. The automated monitoring stations that watched the barrier registered a brief energy spike, so small that it was dismissed as background radiation. A single ping on a sensor array, lasting less than a second, was logged as equipment malfunction. The Federation celebrated its peace, confident in its righteousness and secure in its beliefs. They had eliminated the source of galactic tension and created a paradise of cooperation. The dangerous humans were gone, reduced to silence behind their quantum prison, no longer able to threaten the stability of civilized space. They had no way of knowing that silence did not mean inactivity. They could not see what was being built, in the darkness beyond their sensors. They had no understanding of what happens when you take a species known for its adaptability and engineering skills, give them 5 years of complete isolation, and provide them with the most powerful motivation possible. The quantum barrier kept Federation sensors from seeing into human space, but it also kept them from seeing what was about to emerge from it. The galaxy slept peacefully, dreaming of permanent tranquility, while in the void between stars, something prepared to wake them from that dream forever. The shipyard orbiting New Terra hummed with activity that would have shocked anyone familiar with human construction methods. Instead of building dozens of vessels simultaneously, every human world had contributed materials, technology, and expertise to a single project that represented the focused will of an entire species. Welders worked in perfect synchronization, their tools guided by artificial intelligence systems that coordinated each movement with microscopic precision. Project Director Helen Park walked through the construction bay, her footsteps echoing, in the vast chamber that housed humanity's answer to exile. The ship taking shape before her bore no resemblance to anything humans had built before. Where their previous vessels had been designed for exploration, trade, and defense, this creation served only one purpose: to demonstrate exactly why the galaxy should have thought twice before casting humanity into the void. Final systems integration is complete, reported Chief Engineer Tom Wilson, his voice carrying the exhaustion of 5 years spent perfecting technologies that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The adaptive armor system can redistribute kinetic impacts across the entire hull structure. Energy weapons will be absorbed and converted to power our own systems. Even a direct hit from a Starkiller weapon wouldn't penetrate our defenses. Park nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. Every system aboard the UES Vengeance had been designed with one goal in mind: to be completely invulnerable to every weapon system the Federation possessed while carrying enough firepower to level entire star systems. But the ship's true power lay not in its weapons but in its ability to appear and disappear without warning. The stealth technology represented humanity's greatest achievement during their years of isolation. By studying every form of detection equipment they had ever encountered in Federation space, human scientists had developed countermeasures that rendered their vessel completely invisible to alien sensors. Heat signatures were absorbed and dispersed through quantum heat sinks. Energy emissions were redirected into pocket dimensions. Even gravitational detectors would register nothing when the Vengeance passed overhead. Dr. Michael Chen, the project's chief scientist, emerged from the weapons testing facility with a grim expression that had become common among the team. The targeting systems have been calibrated for every major Federation species. Ion disruptors specifically tuned to overload ethereal energy matrices, kinetic penetrators designed to crack through hegemony carapaces, neural scramblers calibrated to disrupt collective hive mind communications. We've essentially built a ship that can counter every defense the Federation possesses. The bridge of the Vengeance reflected humanity's new philosophy. No wasted space, no decorative elements, no compromises for comfort or aesthetics. Every surface served a tactical purpose. Every system was designed for maximum efficiency in combat situations. The command chair sat at the center of a sphere of tactical displays that could process information from across an entire star system simultaneously. Captain Alex Carter reviewed the final mission parameters while his crew ran through their last simulations. Unlike the diverse crews that had once served aboard human vessels, the Vengeance carried only volunteers who had lost family or friends during the forced evacuation of human colonies. They were not soldiers seeking glory or adventure. They were representatives of a species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point. The psychological warfare protocols are ready for deployment, reported Communications Officer Lisa Torres, daughter of the ambassador who had defended humanity at their trial. Every major Federation news network, every planetary communication system, Every diplomatic channel is already compromised. When we're ready to broadcast, our message will reach every being in Federation space simultaneously. The ship's artificial intelligence, codenamed Oracle, had been programmed with detailed psychological profiles of every known Federation species. It could predict how different alien races would react to various forms of pressure, identify the optimal targets to create maximum psychological impact, and coordinate attacks that would divide the Federation against itself without firing a shot. President Maria Gonzalez arrived at the shipyard for the final departure ceremony, her presence marking the culmination of 5 years of preparation that had transformed humanity from a spacefaring civilization into something far more focused and dangerous. Every human colony had contributed resources to this project. Every human scientist had shared their knowledge. Every human engineer had perfected their skills for this moment. The Federation wanted to see what humans become when you strip away our restraint, she said, addressing the crew that would carry humanity's response to the stars. They will have their answer. But remember, we are not becoming the monsters they claimed we were. We are showing them what monsters actually look like when you create them through injustice. The mission parameters were clear and had been debated extensively by the human resistance government. No civilian targets would be engaged. No innocent populations would be harmed. But every Federation military installation, every government, facility, every symbol of the organization that had cast humanity into exile would face complete destruction. The galaxy would learn the difference between human restraint and human capability. The Vengeance's departure from New Terra was witnessed by the entire human population through quantum-linked observation systems. Children who had been forced to abandon their homes watched as their species' response to injustice took flight. Adults who had lost careers and dreams in the evacuation saw their sacrifice transformed into purpose. Elderly humans who had spent their final years in exile knew their suffering had meaning. The ship slipped through the quantum barrier using technology that turned the Federation's own prison into a doorway. Systems designed to keep humanity contained became pathways for their return, modified by 5 years of intensive study and engineering brilliance that had focused entirely on this moment. As the Vengeance entered Federation space for the first time in half a decade, its sensors immediately began cataloging targets and analyzing defenses. The galaxy had grown soft during the years of peace. Their military systems relaxed and their guard lowered. What had once been humanity's greatest challenge, overcoming superior numbers and established positions, had become their greatest advantage. Captain Carter took his position in the command chair as the ship approached its first target, the Deep Space Command Center that served as the Federation's most secure military facility. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had spent 5 years preparing for this single moment. They were no longer explorers or defenders. They had become instruments of a justice that the galaxy had made inevitable. 3. Federation had wanted to see what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. They were about to find out that the greatest mistake any civilization can make is teaching a peaceful species how to wage war effectively, then giving them 5 years to perfect their lessons in complete isolation. The stars themselves seemed to dim as the Vengeance prepared to announce humanity's return to a galaxy that had forgotten the most important truth about the species they had exiled. Humans had never been the aggressors in their own stories, but they were very, very good at ending other people's stories when forced to do so. The Deep Space Command Center had been the Federation's pride for over a century. A massive installation that could coordinate military operations across 3 galactic sectors simultaneously. Its shields could deflect the combined firepower of entire fleets. Its sensors could detect threats from light years away, and its automated defense systems had never failed to protect the facility from any conceivable attack. Security Officer Nash finished his routine patrol of the outer sensor array, noting with satisfaction that all systems showed green across the board. The quantum barrier monitoring stations reported continued silence from human space, and the latest intelligence briefing suggested that the exiled species had probably destroyed itself years ago. The galaxy was at peace, and facilities like Deep Space Command served more as symbols of Federation power than actual military necessities. The first indication that something was wrong came from the gravitational sensors, which registered a brief anomaly directly above the station's primary shield generator. Before Nash could even begin to investigate, the space above the facility seemed to tear open like fabric, revealing the dark hull of a vessel that should not have been able to exist. The UES Vengeance dropped out of its quantum fold drive with mechanical precision, its adaptive armor already adjusting to the electromagnetic signatures of the Federation facility below. Captain Carter studied the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had rehearsed this moment countless times during the years of exile. "All systems operational," reported Weapons Officer Davis, his hands moving across controls that had been designed specifically for this target. "Shields are negligible, defense systems are powered down to standby mode, and life sign scans indicate approximately 3,000 beings aboard the facility." The station's automated defense systems finally responded to the impossible appearance of a human vessel in Federation space. Weapons platforms swiveled toward the Vengeance, their targeting computers struggling to lock onto a ship that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy beams lanced upward, only to be absorbed harmlessly by armor that converted the attacks into additional power for the human ship's systems. Carter opened communications channels that bypassed every security protocol the Federation had ever developed, his voice reaching every being aboard the station simultaneously. "Attention, Deep Space Command Center. You have 60 seconds to evacuate all personnel to life pods. This facility will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation." The evacuation proceeded with the efficiency that surprised even the human crew. Federation training had apparently included protocols for impossible scenarios, and within 58 seconds, a stream of life pods began launching from the station. Nash found himself floating in a tiny rescue capsule, watching through the viewport as the vessel that had ended 5 years of galactic peace prepared to demonstrate human engineering capabilities. The Vengeance's primary weapon was not a traditional energy beam or kinetic projectile. Instead, it fired a stream of exotic particles that existed in a state of quantum superposition, allowing them to pass through shields and armor as if they were empty space, then reassemble into solid matter once they reached their target. The body result was not an explosion, but a systematic dismantling at the molecular level. Deep Space Command Center simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in the traditional sense, but reduced to its component atoms in a process that took exactly 4 seconds. The life pods automatically triggered their emergency beacons, ensuring that rescue ships would find the evacuated crew within hours. High Admiral Kess received the impossible report while reviewing peaceful trade negotiations in his office on Harmony Prime. A single human vessel had somehow bypassed the quantum barrier, appeared at the Federation's most secure facility, and completely destroyed it without harming a single life. The psychological implications were staggering. If humans could strike there, they could strike anywhere. "Assemble the Grand Fleet," Kess ordered, his voice tight with the first fear he had experienced in years. "Every available ship from every member species. We're dealing with a threat that makes our previous estimates of human capabilities look like children's toys." The response was immediate but chaotic. 300 vessels from 17 different species began converging on the coordinates where Deep Space Command Center had once existed, each contingent operating under different tactical doctrines and command structures. The crystalline builders contributed their geometric warships that could reshape themselves for optimal combat configurations. The hegemony sent their insectoid swarm vessels, designed to overwhelm enemies through sheer numbers. The collective deployed their hive-mind coordinated fleet, where every ship acted as part of a single distributed intelligence. But when the Grand Fleet arrived, they found only empty space and the cooling radiation signature of a facility that no longer existed. The human vessel had vanished as completely as it had appeared, leaving no trace of its passing or any indication of where it might strike next. The answer came in the form of simultaneous attacks across 12 sectors. The Vengeance seemed to exist in multiple places at once, appearing long enough to evacuate and destroy key military installations before vanishing back into the quantum foam that surrounded known space. Each attack followed the same pattern: a brief warning, time for evacuation, then complete annihilation of the target. The psychological warfare was more devastating than the physical destruction. Federation species that had felt secure behind their advanced technology and unified military began demanding additional protection. Trade routes shut down as merchant vessels refused to travel without heavy military escorts. The unity that had defined the Federation since humanity's exile began to crack as member worlds questioned the competence of their leadership. Commander Vale of the Watchers studied sensor logs from the attacks with growing bewilderment. "Admiral, this isn't following any known tactical doctrine. They're not trying to control territory or eliminate military threats. They're systematically destroying symbols of Federation power while leaving civilian infrastructure completely untouched." The pattern became clear as more reports arrived. Humanity was not seeking conquest or genocide. They were delivering a message that could not be misunderstood. Every species that had voted for their exile was being shown exactly what they had unleashed by forcing a peaceful civilization to become something else entirely. The ethereal homeworld's orbital defense platforms were reduced to quantum dust. In 18 seconds, their energy-based weapons proving completely useless against human adaptive shielding. The hegemony's military shipyards were dismantled with surgical precision, leaving their civilian manufacturing facilities completely untouched. The collective's coordination centers were destroyed by weapons that specifically targeted their hive mind communications, leaving individual ships intact but unable to operate as a unified force. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Carter reviewed tactical updates with grim satisfaction. They had achieved something no military strategist thought possible, turning an entire galaxy's strength against itself through fear alone. Federation fleets were now paralyzed by the need to protect every important facility simultaneously, while never knowing where the human vessel might appear next. Communications from 17 Federation worlds requesting immediate protection, reported Torres, her voice carrying both exhaustion and satisfaction. The Gardener species has formally requested an emergency council session to discuss peace negotiations. 3 member worlds are threatening to withdraw from the Federation if adequate protection isn't provided within 48 hours. The galaxy that had once united to exile humanity was tearing itself apart trying to defend against a single vessel that had become the embodiment of consequences they had never imagined. The Federation had created exactly what they claimed to: fear, a human military force operating without restraint or mercy, striking where and when it chose, answerable to no authority except its own sense of justice. But this was only the beginning. The Vengeance had demonstrated human capabilities, but the real message was yet to be delivered. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between human technology and human determination, between their weapons and their will. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the exiled species prepared to deliver the final lesson to those who had cast them out, that the greatest mistake any civilization can make is teaching a peaceful people to become effective enemies, then leaving them with nothing to lose. Harmony Prime had never experienced fear in its 3-century history as the capital of galactic civilization. The massive orbital station had weathered political crises, economic collapses, and natural disasters with the calm confidence of beings who knew they represented the highest achievement of interstellar cooperation. But now, as alarms shrieked across every deck and emergency protocols activated throughout the facility, that confidence crumbled like sand in solar wind. The UES Vengeance materialized directly above the station's central hub, its dark hull blotting out the stars visible through the great dome of the diplomatic chambers. Unlike its previous lightning-fast strikes against military installations, the human vessel made no aggressive moves. It simply hung in space like a sword of judgment, its weapons powered but not targeting, its message clear to every being aboard, the Federation's greatest symbol. Dr. Nesh abandoned her quantum research laboratory and ran through corridors filled with panicking aliens, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing through the observation ports. The ship above them was impossible according to every principle of physics she understood. It existed in too many dimensional states simultaneously. Its armor seemed to absorb energy rather than reflect it, and her instruments registered readings that shouldn't have been achievable with any known technology. In the central diplomatic chamber, High Arbiter Voss stood before the great viewing screen that now displayed the impossible sight of humanity's return. The ethereal being's usual composure had evaporated, replaced by trembling fear that rippled through their energy matrix like visible distortion. Around them, representatives from 47 species stared upward at their own mortality made manifest. The communication that reached every screen, every speaker, and every neural interface in Federation space carried no anger or hatred. Captain Carter's voice was calm, measured, and carried the weight of 5 years spent preparing for this moment. Behind his words, images played of the destroyed installations, the evacuated crews, the precision with which humanity had dismantled, the Federation's military power without spilling a single drop of innocent blood. "You wish to see what humanity becomes when you strip away our restraint," Carter said, his image broadcast simultaneously to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "You have your answer. We could have chosen differently. We could have targeted your civilian populations, your cultural centers, your homes and families. We chose mercy instead, but do not mistake mercy for weakness." High Arbiter Voss activated their emergency communication system, their voice shaking as they appeared on screens throughout Federation space. The being who had once pronounced humanity's exile with cold certainty now pleaded for negotiation, offering territorial concessions, technological exchanges, even permanent seats on the High Council for Human Representatives. But Carter's response came not through communication channels, but through action. The Vengeance moved slowly around Harmony Prime, its sensors scanning every defense system, every weapon platform, every possible threat the station could pose. The message was unmistakable. Humanity could destroy the Federation's heart at any moment but was choosing not to do so. The psychological impact was complete. Federation fleets arrived by the dozens, their commanders receiving frantic orders to engage the human vessel, but none dared fire the first shot. They could see the power readings from the Vengeance, could calculate the defensive capabilities that had rendered their most advanced weapons useless, could understand that any attack would result in their own immediate destruction, followed by the annihilation of everything they were trying to protect. Admiral Kess found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding the largest military force in galactic history while being completely unable to use it. His tactical officers provided constant updates on fleet positions, weapon readiness, and attack vectors, but every simulation ended the same way: total Federation defeat and the destruction of their capital. "Sir, we have 300 vessels in defensive positions around Harmony Prime," reported his aide, a young member of the Watcher species whose sensor-focused evolution made them ideal tactical coordinators. "But our weapons analysis indicates that the human ship could eliminate our entire fleet in under 12 minutes, while simultaneously destroying the station. Their defensive systems have rendered our technological advantage completely meaningless." The negotiations that followed were not between equals. The Federation Council convened an emergency session, while the Vengeance maintained its position above their heads, its presence a constant reminder of how completely the balance of power had shifted. Humanity did not request readmission to the galactic community. They demanded its complete restructuring. Ambassador David Torres, now representing the Human Resistance government, presented terms that would have been unthinkable 5 years earlier. The vote that had exiled humanity must be formally rescinded with public acknowledgement that it had been based on fear rather than justice. Each of the 45 species that had cast humans out must offer formal apologies broadcast to their entire populations. The quantum barrier must be dismantled immediately, and human space must be returned to its original borders with significant additional territory as compensation. But the most significant demand was not territorial or political. Humanity insisted on the adoption of what they called the Council of Understanding, a new governing structure where no species could be exiled or discriminated against without unanimous consent from all Federation members. The galaxy would learn what humans had known all along, that diversity included the right to be different, even uncomfortably so. The debate in the Federation Council was brief and one-sided. With the Vengeance hanging directly overhead, capable of ending their civilization in moments but choosing restraint, the delegates had little choice but to accept humanity's terms. Species that had once voted with confidence for exile now competed to offer the most sincere apologies and the most generous concessions. President Gonzalez arrived at Harmony Prime, aboard a small diplomatic shuttle that passed through Federation lines without challenge. Her meeting with the Council was broadcast live throughout the galaxy, showing beings from across known space the woman who had led humanity through 5 years of exile and transformation. "We did not choose this path," she told the assembled representatives, her words carrying to every world in Federation space. "You forced us to become something we never wanted to be. But in doing so, you taught us valuable lessons about power, justice, and the responsibility that comes with both. We return not as the same species you exiled, but as your teachers." The formal ceremonies took place over 3 days. The original exile vote was rescinded unanimously, with several representatives breaking down emotionally as they acknowledged their mistakes. The quantum barrier was deactivated in a ceremony that allowed communication between human and Federation space for the first time in 5 years. The territorial agreements were signed by every species leader personally, many of whom traveled to Harmony Prime specifically to meet the humans they had once cast out. But the most powerful moment came when Captain Carter finally spoke directly to High Arbiter Voss. The human officer who had spent 5 years planning the Federation's defeat stood face to face with the being who had pronounced his species' exile. And when he spoke, his words carried no anger or desire for revenge. "You feared what we might become if pushed to our limits," Carter said, his voice calm and measured. "You have seen what we became. But you also saw that we chose restraint when we could have chosen destruction, mercy when we could have chosen vengeance. Perhaps that is the lesson the galaxy needed to learn." The transformation of galactic civilization began immediately. The Council of Understanding was established with human oversight, ensuring that no species would ever again face the injustice of exile based on fear or prejudice. Federation military doctrine was completely restructured, with human tactical expertise helping to create defensive strategies that emphasized protection rather than aggression. The technology sharing agreements that followed revolutionized galactic civilization. Human advances in quantum mechanics, developed during their years of isolation, led to breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel and communication. Their medical research, refined through necessity during the exile, provided cures for diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries. Their engineering principles, perfected in the construction of the Vengeance, enabled the building of space habitats that could house entire populations. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy learned to value diversity, not as a source of conflict, but as a strength that made their civilization more resilient. Species that had once viewed human aggression as a threat began to understand it as a protective instinct that had sheltered them from dangers they had never imagined. The Vengeance remained in orbit around Harmony Prime for 6 months, not as a threat, but as a guardian. Its crew worked with Federation scientists to share the technologies they had developed. Its weapon systems were studied to improve galactic defenses, and its very presence served as a reminder that strength and wisdom could coexist. When the Idinoma ship finally departed for human space, it left behind a galaxy fundamentally changed by the encounter. The Federation had learned that justice delayed was justice denied, that fear was a poor foundation for governance, and that the greatest mercy sometimes came from the demonstration of power coupled with the restraint not to use it. Captain Carter stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as it passed back through the space where the quantum barrier had once stood, now serving as a gateway rather than a prison. Behind them, the lights of Harmony Prime sparkled with the hope of a civilization that had learned to value what made each species unique rather than fearing their differences. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter as humanity took its place not just among the galactic community, but as its conscience. The exiles had become the guardians, and the galaxy would never again underestimate human fury or human mercy. The species that had once been cast out for their potential for violence had returned to teach their former judges the most important lesson of all, that true strength was measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the wisdom to choose when not to. The war that had lasted only days would be remembered for generations, not for its destruction, but for its demonstration that justice and mercy could coexist even in the darkest moments of galactic history. Humanity had been banished as dangerous warmongers, but they returned as the galaxy's unlikely teachers, proving that sometimes the greatest act of peace was the controlled application of overwhelming force in service of a greater good.